Grieving. I'm going to be grieving on camera thanks to one of the chapters in this book, Letting Go by David R. Hawkins. I'm going to be listening to the audiobook version in my headphones and grieving and filming it to show you what that looks like for me. So let's go.
Grief is an experience common to us all. In grief, we feel that things are too difficult, we'll never make it, we are unloving and unlovable. We have thoughts such as, all the years I've wasted. It is a feeling of sadness and loss, loneliness, the feeling of if only, regret, feelings of abandonment, pain, helplessness and hopelessness, nostalgia, melancholy, depression, longing, irretrievable loss, heartbrokenness, anguish, disappointment, pessimism. Grief can be precipitated by the loss of a belief system, a relationship, a capacity or role, a hope about ourselves, or an overall attitude toward our life, external circumstances or institutions. It's the feeling, I'll never get over this. This one is too difficult. I tried, but nothing helps. There is a feeling of vulnerability to pain and suffering, and so we see a great deal of it in the external world to reinforce and justify our own inner feeling. There is a crying for someone to help because we can't do anything about it, and we feel that maybe someone else can do it for us. This is in contradistinction to apathy, where there is a feeling that no one can help. Allowing the grief. Most of us carry a great deal of suppressed grief. Men especially are prone to hide that particular feeling, as it is considered unmanly and unmasculine to cry. Most people are afraid of the amount of grief they have suppressed. They are terrified that they will be swamped and overwhelmed by it. People will say, if I were ever to start crying, I would never stop. There is so much grief in the world, grief in my life, grief in my family and friends. Oh, the untold tragedies of life. All of the disappointments and smashed hopes. Suppressed grief is responsible for many psychosomatic conditions and health-related complaints. Instead of suppressing the feeling, if it is allowed to come up and be relinquished, we can quickly jump from grief to acceptance. The continuing grief over a loss is due to the resistance to accepting that state and allowing the grief to expend itself. The persistence of a feeling is due to the resistance to allowing it to be relinquished, e.g., cry me a river. Once we accept the fact that we can handle grief, we are already up into pride. The feeling of I can do it and I can handle it brings us to courage. With the courage to face our inner feelings and let them go, we thus move on to the levels of acceptance and eventually peace. When we let go of a lot of grief we have been holding over the years, our friends and family will notice a change in our facial expression. Our step will be lighter and we will look younger. Grief is time-limited. This fact gives us the courage and willingness to face grief. If we don't resist the feeling of grief and totally surrender to it, it will run out in about 10-20 minutes. Then it will stop for variable lengths of time. If we keep surrendering to it every time it comes up, then it will eventually run out. We just allow ourselves to experience it fully. We only have to tolerate an overwhelming grief for 10-20 minutes, and then all of a sudden it will disappear. If we resist the grief, then it will go on and on. Suppressed grief can go on for years. In facing grief, we often have to acknowledge and let go of our shame and embarrassment about having the feeling in the first place. For men, this is especially so. We have to relinquish our fear of the feeling and our fear of being swamped and overwhelmed by it. It helps to realize that letting go of the resistance to the feeling moves us quickly through it. Traditionally, women have said out of their own experience and wisdom, "A good cry makes me feel better." Many a man has been surprised when he learned the truth of this. Experientially, there was the surprising and almost immediate relief from a pounding headache as soon as the grief about a past situation was allowed to come up. As the grief surfaced, there was the sentence, "Men don't cry." After letting go of the masculine pride about crying, then up came a fear that the crying would never stop once it was allowed to start. As soon as that fear was gone, then there was anger. It was anger at a society that forces men to suppress their feelings, and anger at the notion that men are not even supposed to have feelings. With the letting go of that anger, the level of courage was reached, and then the needed crying could be allowed. Not only was there relief from the headache, but when the torrent of sobs subsided, a profound peacefulness settled. Henceforth, the subject did not have to be avoided. Once a man has fully let the grief come up and totally freed himself from that suppressed energy, he is peaceful and his view of his own masculinity changes. He realizes that his masculinity is now more complete. He is still just as much of a man, But now he is a man who can also be in touch with and handle his own feelings. Consequently, he is more adequate, more capable, more well-rounded, more understanding, more mature, more capable of relating to and understanding others, more compassionate, and more loving. The psychological basis of all grief and mourning is attachment. Attachment and dependence occur because we feel incomplete within ourselves. Therefore, we seek objects, people, relationships, places, and concepts to fulfill inner needs. Because they are unconsciously utilized to fulfill an inner need, they come to be identified as mine. As more energy is poured into them, there is a transition from identifying with the external objects as mine to being an actual extension of me. Loss of the object or person is experienced as a loss of our own self and an important part of our emotional economy. Loss is experienced as a diminution of the quality of ourselves, which the object or person represented. The more emotional energy invested in the object or person, the greater will be the feeling of loss, and the greater the pain associated with the undoing of the bonds of dependence. Attachment creates a dependency, and dependency, because of its nature, intrinsically carries with it a fear of loss. Within each person, there is the child, parent, and adult. When grief comes up, it is rewarding to ask, within myself, is it the child, parent, or adult that is the source of this feeling? For example, the child within a person is scared that something will happen to a beloved dog. It wonders, how will I make it? The inner adult also feels grief, but the adult accepts the inevitable. The little kitty or doggy is not immortal. The adult in us regretfully accepts that impermanency is a reality of life. We accept that our youth is not permanent, that many romantic relationships are not lifelong, and that our dog will one day die. Handling loss. Because of the nature of attachment, the first state preceding the actual experiencing of loss is that of fear of loss. This is usually defended in one of two ways. One is to increase the intensity of the attachment by ever-persistent attempts to strengthen the bonds. This approach is based on the fantasy that the greater the bond, the less likelihood of loss. However, this is the very maneuver that often precipitates loss in personal relationships, because the other person struggles to be free of the possessive attachment and the amount of restrictive control they feel being placed upon them. Thus, because what we hold in mind tends to manifest, the fear of a loss can, paradoxically, be the mechanism of bringing about that loss. The second way that fear of loss is handled is by the psychological mechanism of denial, which is, in common language, called playing ostrich. We see this around us every day in its various forms of refusing to face the inevitable. All the warning signs are there, but the person does not take heed. Thus, the man who is obviously in the process of losing his job tends not to notice. The partners in a marriage that is going down the drain take no corrective action. The person with a serious disease ignores all of the symptoms and avoids medical attention. The politicians fail to look at social problems, hoping they will go away. Whole countries are oblivious to the precarious state of existence, e.g., 9/11 attack. The motorist ignores the ominous warning signals of a misbehaving engine. We have all experienced regret that we didn't pay attention to the warning signals of trouble ahead. To handle the fear of loss, we have to look at what purpose the external person or object serves in our life. What emotional need is being fulfilled? What emotions would arise were we to lose the object or the person? Loss can be anticipated, and we can handle the various fears associated with the sense of loss by disassembling the emotional complexes that they represent and letting go of the individual component feelings. Let's say, for example, that you have a pet dog to which you have been attached for many years. It is obvious that old Rover is getting older. You find that you don't like to think about his advanced age, feeling uncomfortable at the prospect of his death and putting it out of mind. As you catch yourself doing this, you realize that these feelings are warning signals and that you are not handling the emotional situation. And so, you ask yourself, what purpose is the dog serving in my life? What is his emotional service to me? Love, companionship, devotion, amusement, and diversion. Will losing the dog leave these personal emotional needs unfulfilled? In looking at this, some of the fear can be acknowledged and relinquished. Once the fear is let go, you don't have to resort to denial and pretend to yourself that Rover will live forever. Another emotion associated with grief and mourning is that of anger. The loss of that which is important frequently brings up a feeling of rage, which may be projected onto the world, society, individuals, and ultimately, God, who is held to be responsible for the nature of the universe. Anger results from prior refusal to accept the fact that all relationships and possessions in this life are transitory. Even the physical body, which is our biggest attachment, eventually has to be relinquished, as everyone is aware. We feel that what has become important or comforting to us is a permanent attachment. Consequently, when that illusion is threatened, there is anger, resentment, and self-pity, feelings which can result in chronic bitterness. Impotent rage is associated with the desire to change the nature of the world and the impossibility of doing so. In facing this fact of existence, a major loss can therefore bring about a shift in our philosophical position. One major loss can awaken us to the nature of all attachments and all relationships, or we may again deny the obvious fact that all relationships are transitory and furiously re-intensify existing bonds to compensate for the loss. Part of handling denial of the inevitability of loss is seeing through attempts at manipulation. In fantasy, the mind tries to develop tactics so as to avoid the loss. This may take the form of becoming gooder or more hardworking, more honest, more persevering, or more loyal. In religious persons, this may take the form of trying to manipulate God by promises and bargains. In relationships, it may take the form of overcompensatory behavior. The spouse becomes ever more dutiful, loving, and attentive in an attempt to prevent a breakup. The inattentive husband suddenly starts bringing home gifts and flowers instead of getting to the root cause of the problem. When the denial breaks down, the manipulations have not worked, and the fear has been passed through, then the depression itself, the actual process of mourning and grief, takes place. All of these emotional stages can be worked through much more rapidly by the process of letting go, in which the inevitability of the emotion of grief is surrendered to and replaced by a willingness to let go of resistance and let the process pass through and complete itself. There can be a decision to let go of resisting the grief. Instead of denial and resistance, you plunge into it and get over it. You have a good cry over old Rover or the lost relationship. Associated with the feeling of grief is always a variable amount of guilt. This is based on the fantasy that the loss represents a punishment or that a different attitude or behavior would have prevented it from happening. Unless it is relinquished, the guilt can then recycle and refuel the anger and rage. The unacknowledged and unrelinquished rage may be projected onto others in the environment in the form of blame. Blame projected onto other relationships may, then, compound the loss by bringing about further loss. This happens frequently between marital partners as a result of the death of a child. It has been reported that the divorce rate among parents who have lost children is as high as 90%. Because of the projection of blame, a severe loss is then compounded by another severe loss, that of a marital partner. An example of this type of reaction is the case of a 40-year-old woman. She had an excellent marriage for 20 years with an attentive, dutiful husband. Her youngest son developed leukemia. When he died, she went into grief and mourning and, more importantly, developed a rage reaction. It took the form of hatred. She hated the doctors, she hated the hospital, she hated God, she hated her husband and the existing children. Her rage became so uncontrollable that she became physically violent and threatening. Several times, the police had to be called to control her violent behavior. Finally, the other children left home out of fear of the chaos, physical abuse, and menacing emotional states. Her husband left no stone unturned in trying to help her with the rage, but she vented her fury upon him as well, violently attacking him on several occasions. Finally, in desperation and despair, he was driven from the home. The chaotic situation ultimately ended in a divorce in which the woman lost her home. It was almost 5 years before the rage subsided, at which time the woman had destroyed her whole life and now had to start over from scratch, rebuilding a new life. When all the negative emotions have been worked through, surrendered to and let go of, relief finally occurs and the former suffering is replaced by acceptance. Acceptance is different from resignation. In resignation, there are still residuals of the previous emotion left. There is reluctance and a delaying of the true recognition of the facts. Resignation says, I don't like it, but I have to put up with it. With acceptance, resistance to the true nature of the facts has been relinquished. Thus, one of the signs of acceptance is serenity. With acceptance, the struggle is over and life begins anew. The energies that were bound up in the previous negative emotion are now freed up, so that the healthier aspects of the personality are now re-energized. The creative aspects of the mind develop opportunities for new life situations and further options for growth and experience, accompanied by a new sense of aliveness.
Okay. I'm realizing, although this chapter is relevant, and there was some like very unique grief that was coming up, I actually have way more anger than grief, and I think that's what's blocking the grief from coming. So I'm going to turn on the anger chapter.
Anger may vary all the way from rage to mild resentment. It includes revenge, outrage, indignation, fury, jealousy, vindictiveness, spite, hatred, contempt, wrath, argumentativeness, hostility, sarcasm, impatience, frustration, negativity, aggression, violence, revulsion, meanness, rebellion, explosive behavior, agitation, abusiveness, abrasiveness, smoldering, sullenness, pouting, and stubbornness. These variations of anger are well exemplified by the daily news on television. Anger may come up about the technique of surrender itself, anger that one is expected to let go of feelings that, in the past, have been valued, anger at the fear of loss, anger at feelings in general, anger at a feeling that does not relinquish immediately. There is a lot of energy in anger, therefore, we may actually feel energized when we are irritated or angry. One of the tricks people learn is to move up quickly from apathy and grief into anger, and then to jump from anger to pride, and then on into courage. In anger, there is the energy for action. This results in doingness in the world. When the have-nots of the world become energized by desire and move up to anger over what they lack, that anger moves them into the actions necessary to fulfill their dreams for a better life. The quantity of suppressed anger in the population can be verified quickly by seeing how popular violence is in the media, where the viewers are presented with a vicarious experience of letting out their anger in the form of beatings, shootings, stabbings, lynchings, killings of various bad guys. We typically feel so much guilt about anger that we find it necessary to make the object of our anger wrong so that we can say our anger is justified. Few are the persons who can take responsibility for their own anger and just say, I am angry because I am full of angriness. Using anger positively. It is common for people to repress their anger, aggression, and inner hostility. They view it as unpleasant, undignified, and even as a moral failure or spiritual setback. They do not realize that repressed anger is nonetheless the energy of anger, and if not acknowledged and worked through, it will have deleterious consequences to their health and overall progress. The intention behind anger is negative, and it will have similar consequences even if it is not expressed. A helpful approach is to view the energy of anger positively and to use it to fire up our ambitions and our actions in a useful way. For instance, let's say that we are angry at our boss. We feel resentful. He never seems to acknowledge our abilities or efforts, but we know it's unwise to express anger and resentment. It would very likely result in the loss of our job or at least bring on the continued resentment of the boss. At best, the expression of anger would result in a tacky situation. Instead, we can make a decision to use that energy in a constructive way in our own behalf. It can be the inspiration for us to create a project that, because of its excellence, proves our point. It might be the energy for us to move up and out of a situation that is unsatisfactory. We can utilize that energy to create new job opportunities or find a better job, form a committee, improve our employment situation, start a union, or whatever we think would benefit our personal goals. Personal relationships, the same opportunity exists. The anger can be utilized to inspire us to improve our communication skills, take a course on interpersonal relationships, or enroll in a self-improvement program. The anger can inspire us to rededication, to put forth greater clarity of effort, and to actually do a better job. In this way, the situation can result in recommitment. It can inspire us to look within ourselves and relinquish all the negative feelings via acceptance. Instead of being mad about it, we can accept it. Self-sacrifice. There are many sources of anger. We have already mentioned that very often a complex of angry feelings is connected with fear, and the anger disappears when we let go of the fear. Another source of anger is that of pride, and especially that aspect of pride called vanity. Frequently, it is our personal pride that feeds and propagates the anger. One source of pride is connected with self-sacrifice. If our relationships with others are associated with our small self in the form of sacrifice, then we are setting ourselves up for later anger because the other person is usually unaware of our sacrifice and is, therefore, unlikely to fulfill our expectations. An example of this comes from a day in the life of a typical traditional marriage. The wife spends the entire day working hard at cleaning the house, meticulously looking after the plants, bringing in flowers, rearranging some furniture, and doing all she can to make the house look beautiful. When the husband comes home, he doesn't say a word about the house or even seem to notice. Instead, he is exhausted from a day at work, and he recounts its various trials and tribulations. In his mind, he is thinking of all the self-sacrifices he has made, the irate customers, the arduous drive through commuter traffic, the irritable boss, and the pressure of deadlines. He is thinking of all that he has done for his wife and family. While he is thinking of all this hardship, she is feeling a mounting resentment that he hasn't acknowledged her efforts, and she goes back in her mind over all the sacrifices she made that day. She could have gone out for lunch with friends. She could have finished reading the book that she is enjoying. She could have watched her favorite program on television. Instead, she did all of this for him, and now he is making no comment on the results of her efforts. As both harbor their grudges, resentments, and frustrations, their inner anger mounts. It is expressed as coolness and detachment as they escape into television for the evening and go to bed silently to brood over their grievances. This is such a typical American home scene that it is almost banal to repeat it here. Yet, its commonness speaks of its learning value to us. We can examine it and try to unravel this decline of a relationship. That which we want, desire, and insist upon from another person is felt by them as pressure. They will therefore unconsciously resist. In the above example, both persons are looking for acknowledgement. They want it, desire it, but block it in each other. Each side feels pressured and consequently resistant. The resistance is because pressure is always felt by us as a denial of our choice. It is felt as emotional blackmail. The unconscious formula goes, give me what I want or I will punish you by withdrawal, anger, pouting, sulking, and resentment. We all resent feeling emotionally blackmailed. We all know the resistance we feel when we become aware that somebody is fishing for a compliment, and the same resistance goes on unconsciously as well as consciously. When we are motivated by self-sacrifice, we are pressuring the other person. Even if we force an acknowledgement, it will be a disgruntled one. A forced compliment does not satisfy. Part of the anger here arises from the pride of self-sacrifice. We have a certain secret vanity about what we are doing for others, and our pride of achievement makes us vulnerable to anger when our sacrifice is not recognized. The way to offset this anger is to acknowledge and relinquish the pride, surrender our desire for the pleasure of self-pity, and instead view our efforts on behalf of others as gifts. We can experience the joy of being generous with others as its own reward. Acknowledgement. One of the great secrets of relationship is acknowledgement. The behavior of others toward us always includes a hidden gift. Even if that behavior appears negative, there is something in it for us. Very often that something appears in the form of a signal to us to become more aware. Let's say, for example, that somebody calls us stupid. Our natural response is one of anger. We can use the energy of that anger consciously. What is that person asking me to become more aware of?
It's interesting. I sometimes after a really long grieving session, I'll feel immense relief and kind of almost like ecstasy of like, thank God I don't have to carry that grief anymore. But because there was so much anger in me this time around, how I feel now isn't relief, but it's more like I'm actually like wanting to be really productive right now. I want to do things. And before this, all I could feel was that there was like some unpleasant agitation in me. There wasn't this like drive to do and to act. And so, interesting result, I guess. I'm like not grounded at all by any means, but I do want to like get shit done. So, I'm going to do that now. Bye. Grief.